Thank you.
I call Grant Robertson.
Chair, as ever, it's a pleasure to follow the life member of the North Shore Toastmasters, Cam Calder, although they might withdraw his life membership after that. But it is good, Mr Chair, to actually have the government taking some calls, because they haven't been taking many calls up to now. We haven't actually had a justification for it. And I'm not sure we've actually yet had a justification for this clause. Tau Henare told us about his appearance in the film Mesmerised. The problem for us was that we had to sit through the sequel, Dazed and Confused. But actually we found out a little bit about the movie Mesmerised that Tau Henare was in. Mr Chair, dropping my paper. The movie Mesmerised is summarised as the ultimate prices paid for a young girl's loss of innocence. That's the film Tau Henare was in. That's the movie that he was in. Fortunately, we didn't get a full... Well, who knows? We didn't get a full summation from Mr Henare about his role. He did say it involved him going from point A to point B. That's all I'll say, Mr Chair.
Point of order. The Honourable
I'm doing this sort of reluctantly, but discussions of dirty movies at this point, sir, I think is well out of order. And while it was touched on by Tau Henare, extending into the way my colleague is doing it, sir, I think is inappropriate.
Thank you. I think the member has the message.
Thank you very much, Mr Chair. One of the things that Mr Henare and Cam Calder have just said is that this industry is worth $2.8 billion to New Zealand. That's right. This is a very significant industry for New Zealand, and 120 films were made in the term of the 5th Labour government because we got in there and supported the growth of this industry. And if the other side of the House is actually serious about supporting the film industry, why did Jerry Brownlee sit there when everyone else in Wellington knew that the Hobbit film, because of the problems that Warners were having themselves in Hollywood, everyone in Wellington knew there was a risk about the Hobbit film, but Jerry Brownlee sat there and did nothing for 2 years. And he stands up on the other side of the House and says, oh, the Labour Party, they just like going to the cocktail parties. No. What we did when we were in office was keep a relationship going with Warners. And that is the issue here today. That's really the reasoning behind this legislation, Mr Chair, is the fact that this government let a relationship with Warners slide, ended up in a crisis, and then opportunistically, out of that crisis, have put forward the legislation that's in front of us today. That is why we are here, Mr Chair. But when we look at the specifics of Clause 4, and we're told by Tau Henare that it's a simple matter. If you're a contractor, you're a contractor. If you're an employee, you're an employee. But it's not that simple, Mr Chair. Sometimes when people come in and sign up to be a contractor, they want that position, they want that job, they want that work. But what happens over time, as it did for Mr Bryson in the case that we've been talking about today, when things change, when the nature of the relationship evolves? Why shouldn't Mr Bryson then become eligible for all of the protections that would come from being an employee? What the Supreme Court said was that if there is a change to employment laws, then if there's a change in the way an employment relationship develops, then that is a legitimate thing to bear in mind. Things don't remain completely static in every employment relationship. So that's why. But the point is, Dr Matt, the certainty was there. The case was done in 2005. This urgent matter, this festering sore that Jerry Brownlee keeps talking about, Avatar was made since then. Lots of movies have been made since then. The situation was absolutely settled in law. This is a complete fiction. And Dr Matt mentions the boycott. The boycott was over, Dr Matt. Everybody knows that. Everybody knows the boycott was over, yet this government has opportunistically brought in this piece of legislation to carry on their attacks on the workers of New Zealand because they know. Well, Dr Matt, what were the thousands of people outside Parliament saying last week? What were they saying? They know that this government is attacking workers' rights in New Zealand, the 90-day bill extension, and that is why, Dr Matt, we don't have trust and confidence on this side of the House that this isn't the beginning of a wider set of employment law changes around the status of contractors. Why couldn't this end up being extended beyond the film industry? It's already extended in Clause 4, Mr. Chair, to the video game industry. When did the video game industry ask to be part of this? Why is the cleaner at two of the really successful video game making companies in Wellington suddenly brought under this set of rules? No one in the government benches has explained how the video game industry came to be caught up in this. This is a shambolic piece of legislation, Mr Chair. It should, if the government was true to its word, have gone to a select committee. It hasn't, Mr Chair, and this law should not proceed.